Total darkness, no sound, just the soft pulse between your eyes. In some monks, this state creates visions. In other people, it awakens an unsettling calm, a presence that observes everything but identifies with nothing. A point of silence so deep, it seems to have a consciousness of its own. But maybe it's not just a feeling. Maybe you're coming into contact with something that ancient cultures described with pinpoint precision, and that science, little by little, is beginning to probe. In the center of the brain, there is a tiny structure, the size of a pea. It regulates your sleep cycles, it reacts to light, and it produces melatonin. But for many spiritual traditions, it does more than that. It sees. They call this structure the pineal gland. In ancient Egypt, it is represented as the eye of Horus, a symbol of higher perception, carved into temples and tombs as a reminder that there is vision beyond vision. In India, it corresponds to the ajna chakra, the subtle center that governs intuition and spiritual discernment. In Vedic texts, it is described as the doorway between worlds, and in Descartes' philosophy, it is pointed to as the seat of the soul. And if all of this seems like an exaggeration, just consider, why did so many cultures that never crossed paths depict the same idea? An inner eye, a third eye that sees the hidden truth of existence. Today, even without absolute scientific consensus, there are studies that point to curious correlations. Some researchers propose that the pineal gland may produce dimethyltryptamine, a substance linked to expanded states of consciousness. Others focus on its electromagnetic functioning, its sensitivity to light, or its crystalline composition. But this video isn't about formulas or laboratories. It's about something more intimate, more direct, something you've already felt, even without understanding. How many times have you sensed something before it happened? How many times have you known a truth without proof, and only later did time confirm what you had already felt? This inner gaze, that manifests as intuition, as feeling, as inexplicable connection, may be more than chance. It may be the echo of an ancient system trying to come back to life, a system you carry within you that might be activating without you realizing it. In this video, you won't hear about mystical powers or empty promises. You'll understand what it really means to awaken the center of silent perception, and why, once it awakens, it doesn't show you what's beyond. It shows you what has always been here, but you forgot to look. Think about what has obscured this silent perception that for so long was treated as one of the greatest keys to human consciousness. The answer isn't just in what we stopped doing, it's in what we were conditioned to believe. We live in an age where seeing clearly has become uncomfortable, where seeing deeply often means going against the consensus, questioning absolute truths, and leaving behind mental comfort zone. To keep people trapped on the surface, modern culture has created a dense field of distractions that operates every day, quietly. The first blockage is physical, and it starts early. Studies indicate that the pineal gland undergoes progressive calcification over the course of life, especially in urban environments. This calcification is the result of factors such as constant exposure to artificial light, excessive fluoride consumption, heavy metals in food, and lack of contact with natural darkness. What was once a subtle regulator of the perception of time begins to function on autopilot when it functions at all. But the true blockage isn't in the chemistry, it's in the mind. From childhood, we learned that only what can be measured, weighed, and proven by others is real. To feel, to intuit, to perceive something without physical evidence became synonymous with naivety. Intuition was downgraded to the category of a guess. Inner wisdom turned into superstition, and silence became discomfort, not a tool. Little by little, what many cultures called the eye of the soul was reduced to a biological curiosity. Talking about it became embarrassing, almost too mystical for rational conversation. And so you learned to distrust yourself, to ignore inner signals, to follow only what is external. The modern world, with all its advancements, brought comfort, but it charged a price: the disconnection from the command center of your own perception. Think for a moment about how many decisions have you made because they seemed right, but deep down carried a slight discomfort, which you ignored. How many times has an idea appeared in your mind with strength and clarity, but was silenced by a, "This doesn't make sense right now." How many times did your intuition warn you and you chose not to listen? These are the small daily silences. There are no screams, no alarms, just a gradual distancing between what you feel and what you obey. And when this distancing sets in, the third eye doesn't close. It falls asleep, not because it lost its function, but because it was ignored too many times. Yet, there's something curious about this process. Even asleep, it doesn't shut off. All it takes is a minimal change, a moment of real stillness, a night of darkness without stimulus, a reunion with your own silence, and it begins to respond. The pineal is sensitive to light, but also to rhythm. It perceives absence, it notices cycles, it senses the difference between presence and distraction. When you create space, even if only for a few minutes, it tries to reclaim what has always been its own, the function of perceiving what the eyes don't show. The world didn't teach you this, but on some level, you've always known. That's why it may not be a coincidence that you are here now, hearing about this. It may simply be a reminder that your inner sensor is still active. It just needs an environment where it can be heard. And it's about this environment that we're going to talk. Now, about what happens when the noise stops, the mind calms down, and something ancient within you awakens, not as magic, but as recognition. And when it is finally heard, what does it show? Unlike what many imagine, the third eye doesn't project supernatural images, doesn't foresee the future like an oracle, and doesn't turn your life into a constant field of mystical visions. What it does is much more subtle and infinitely deeper. It reveals patterns, it reveals distortions, it reveals what was silent yet always present. You begin to notice what once went unnoticed. Subtle expressions on someone's face, micro conflicts in your daily decisions, feelings that aren't yours but that you had been carrying as if they were. It's not about magic, but refined sensitivity. It's not seeing something new. It's seeing what has always been there with a clear gaze. The third eye doesn't add. It removes the filters, and when the filters fall, reality becomes denser, more symbolic, more precise. A banal gesture carries meaning, and an ordinary conversation brings codes. A dream stops being random and becomes a field of instruction where your psyche speaks to you in visual language. It's here that many accounts converge, even among people who have never met. The gradual activation of the pineal gland is often accompanied by an increase in the perception of synchronicities, seemingly random events that carry personal meaning. Geometric images also begin to appear during meditative states, lucid dreams, or even in moments of contemplation. Feelings of familiarity with newly met people, and perhaps the most common of all, an internal restlessness that's hard to explain. This restlessness is not discomfort. It is a calling, as if something within you were rearranging the pieces on the board and beginning to see connections between things that once seemed isolated, as if life were beginning to tell a greater story, and you realized you'd been part of it all along. This symbolic awakening, though intense, is not sudden. It is gradual. It's as if the logical mind slowly steps back to make space for intuitive listening. But pay attention. This doesn't mean abandoning reason. It means balancing it with a quieter kind of intelligence, the kind that perceives before it understands, that recognizes before it proves. It's at this point that science and spirituality truly begin to dialogue. Research with experienced meditators shows that, during certain states of focus and silence, there is a measurable change in the brain's electrical patterns, with an emphasis on the theta and gamma waves. These are the frequencies that facilitate access to deep memories, heightened creativity, and a sense of unity with the environment. The pineal gland, in this context, functions like a translator. It picks up variations in the surrounding field, responds to the absence of light, regulates internal rhythms, and, according to some hypotheses still under study, may be involved in the release of substances that induce expanded states of consciousness. The most fascinating part is that none of this needs to be forced. True activation doesn't come from an external ritual, but from internal alignment. It's when the mind quiets down, the body opens up, and perception stops chasing things and starts receiving. When this happens, insights arise that don't come from effort. They come from closeness, as if entire ideas arrive not in words but in complete sensations, like packages of emotional information. You don't think something you know. And this knowing isn't arrogance, it's peace, because it doesn't need to be defended. It simply is. This is the point where the third eye stops being a metaphor and becomes a personal experience. You feel, you perceive, you remember. And in remembering, something within you repositions itself. The world around you may remain the same, but your reading of it changes completely. Lies become uncomfortable. Rushing starts to feel artificial. The noisy emptiness of distractions loses its flavor, and in its place, a new kind of thirst is born. Thirst for truth, for presence, for integrity. This is where you begin to feel the real impact of inner vision. Because it's not an escape from reality. It is the opposite of that. It reconnects you to the essence of what's happening now, without distractions, without anesthesia, without wall. From this point on, the next step is no longer a matter of curiosity. It's a matter of choice. Every true choice carries a cost. When you begin to see more clearly, you're not just choosing to see more. You also start to see what you preferred to keep hidden. This is the point where many step back. The third eye, when awakened, doesn't only select the beautiful. It doesn't filter to please. It reveals, and among what is revealed, there is light, but also shadow. You begin to notice your inconsistencies, your repetitive cycles, and the self-sabotaging patterns that were so woven into your routine. They seem normal. You see the choices made out of fear, the words spoken just to please, and the paths abandoned for lack of courage. There's no way to unsee it. Clarity starts to demand integrity, because what was once just a fleeting discomfort now becomes impossible to ignore. This is the paradox of inner awakening. It brings relief, but also weight. It brings lucidity, but that lucidity demands a new kind of presence. You begin to notice yourself in the subtlest of details. In the moment you lie to someone, even if it's a small omission. In the instant you do something just to be accepted, while deep inside, something screams for authenticity. And in the moment you distance yourself from your truth, out of fear of not being understood. This perception is not comfortable, but it's the only one that truly frees. Because until now, you were reacting without noticing the strings that moved your decisions. Now you see behind the scenes, and seeing behind the scenes requires responsibility. True spiritual vision doesn't romanticize life. It doesn't mask suffering, nor does it turn everything into flowers and lightness. It shows with precision where you are still trapped. And more than that, it shows that you are the one holding those chains. It's at this point that many people give up. They prefer to return to functional blindness, to the comfort of autopilot, to a way of life that doesn't demand constant awareness of one's own actions and thoughts. But you've already crossed the threshold. You felt too much to go back. And even if you try, a part of you already knows it won't be possible to live asleep again. The question that arises then is not, how do I keep awakening? But, are you willing to sustain lucidity even when it's not convenient? The third eye, once activated, becomes a living lens. It not only shows the world around you, but it also forces you to look within with radical honesty. The more you observe, the more you understand that what you used to call spirituality may have just been a disguised escape. That many of your pursuits weren't about truth, but about relief. But truth doesn't offer immediate relief. It offers freedom. And freedom is a path that demands renunciation of lies, of denial, of the idealized self-image. It's in this process that you begin to mature spiritually, because the activation of the third eye isn't about mystical powers. It's about seeing with depth what is here. It's about acting with clarity. It's about no longer negotiating with your own conscience. When you accept that, something changes in an irreversible way. You begin to observe the world with clear eyes, not to judge it, but to understand it in its raw essence. You see the pain behind people's aggression. You see the fear behind social masks. You see the need disguised as arrogance. And in seeing, you stop reacting and begin to respond with presence. This is the new weight. You can no longer act on impulse. You can no longer pretend you don't know. You can no longer say, I didn't notice. Because now you see, and seeing is a commitment. It's a silent vow to the real. Most people don't want this responsibility. That's why they ridicule those who talk about intuition, dismiss those who seek self-knowledge, and take refuge in an excess of certainties. But you're not here for comfort. You're here because, at some point on your journey, you began to suspect there was something more. And when that suspicion became certainty, the question changed. It stopped being, "How do I awaken?" and became, "What am I going to do with what I've seen?" When the third eye opens, it doesn't turn you into someone special. It simply reminds you of who you've always been, before the layers, before the conditioning. The activation of this inner vision is not a mystical event reserved for a few. It is a continuous process that begins the moment you decide to stop running from yourself. With every decision guided by intuition, every silence respected, and every feeling you choose to hear instead of ignore, you strengthen that connection. Little by little, your reality changes, because when the observer changes, everything changes. It's not about seeking the extraordinary, but about beginning to notice the extraordinary in the ordinary, in a glance, in a gesture, in the breath, in the pause. Third eye doesn't pull you away from the world. It inserts you into it with more presence, more clarity, and more compassion. And if you've made it this far, it's not by chance. It's because something in you already recognizes this journey. Something in you already knows that it's ready to stop living on autopilot. The transformation this video proposes isn't theoretical. It's a practical invitation to reconnect with your most subtle perception, to walk with more awareness, to act with more coherence, to stop ignoring the signs, to be silent in order to listen, and to listen in order to finally remember. The philosopher Plotinus almost 2,000 years ago wrote, "Close the eyes of the body to open the eyes of the soul." Spiritual vision is not an escape from reality. It is a return to raw truth without embellishments to what you already knew but forgot, of convenience. But there comes a point from which falling back asleep becomes impossible. You may try to ignore what you felt, muffle the clarity, and dive again into distractions. But something in you has already shifted from where it was. The consciousness that has expanded does not return to its previous state. It keeps watching, quiet, present, unstoppable. And in that space between who you were and what you've begun to see, a certainty is born that few have the courage to accept. Living in the dark is comfortable, but seeing with lucidity is freedom. And once touched by that freedom, there is no turning back. If this content resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Write in the comments, "I choose to see with awareness," and affirm this commitment to your inner truth. Share this video with someone who is also ready to awaken. And now, click on the screen to watch another transformative video from the channel. Because when vision expands, life stops being repetition and becomes revelation.